And these teams include not just subject matter experts, but also librarians and administrators and instructional designers. The goals of the program range from teaching essential publishing skills and workflows to improving institutional capacity for OER publishing, and also encouraging individual reflection in the participants around their pedagogical practice and their expertise with technology. So as we get started, I'm gonna pull up a reminder from yesterday. As Silver Moon shared, we are on Narragansett land right now. I don't know how many of you have interacted with them or really gone out and explored more of the city. I'm going to encourage you to keep doing that and keep committing to reconciliation work and decolonization work in your own practice. You'll see some of us talking about that maybe today. And I think with that, I will ask our speakers to introduce yourselves. How long have you been facilitating for Rebus? What other roles do you hold in Open? And Liza, maybe you can kick it off.
I thought we'd kick it off with Bryan, but I'm Liza Long. I'm an associate professor of English at the College of Western Idaho, and I became involved with Rebus as part of our OPAL Fellowship to promote open education resources. And it was just an amazing experience. We kind of call it our pandemic project. Joel and I worked on ours together, but it's just really, really a great opportunity to connect with something that I feel passionately about access, open education, and I'm working with my third cohort now with the MOST grant in Maryland.
Bryan, what about you?
Hi, everybody. I'm Bryan McGeary. I'm the Learning Design and Open Education Engagement Librarian at Penn State University. I first got involved with Rebus as a participant, I guess that would have been in like spring of 2020, so it was very interesting timing for that. We had a group from Penn State go through the program, and then the following year, in 2021, was the first time that I was like a facilitator for Rebus, and I've been doing it, I think, every year since then. I'm currently working with, I believe it's my 5th cohort with the Lewis folks in Louisiana.
Thank you. And everyone in the chat seems to love your glasses. The folks in the room also look amazing.
Thank you.
Stacy, can you introduce yourself, please?
Sure. I'm Stacy Katz. I'm the Open Resources Librarian at Lehman College, which is part of CUNY. I started with Rebus in 2019 on a project of teachers as storytellers. And then I facilitated a cohort in 2021, I think it was, and I'm in the EDD program, so that is all I have done since.
Dope.
My name is Joel Glad, and I'm in the same cohort as Liza, and we worked again, and Bryan. And Liza and I worked on a textbook that has kind of become, I like to refer to it as like a platform and not just a textbook. It's continually iterated. And we recently presented on our AI training that's incorporated within that the writing textbook. So yeah, it's been pretty incredible. And I started facilitating, I think a few weeks or maybe a month before Bryan, around the same time. But I would visit Bryan, like, hey, let me see, like I think you're better at this than me. So let's see what's going on. And I definitely benefited from it. So.
Well, you might have noticed we don't have any slides up here. You guys see Bryan's face and his lovely glasses here today. We do have more information about all 4 of them in a handout. So I'm going to request Liza drop in a link to the handout in the chat. And for everyone here, there's a bit.ly for you. It's also in the shed. So if you were curious, questions, and to learn more about them, they're in the handout. But this is going to be a very informal conversation. All right. I guess I can start off questions. Yeah, start off with the questions. We're talking about facilitation methods and how they connect to leadership. So what facilitation methods have you all recognized or sort of identified as transferable leadership skills in your tenure as Rebus facilitators? How do you think, what are the unique skill sets? What are the responsibilities? What is the impact of emerging OER leaders like yourself? How does everything connect? Go ahead, Joel.
I can respond to that briefly. So my leadership opportunities in higher education are kind of strange. There's not a consistent mechanism for making that happen. And so yes, I was contingent faculty and then full-time faculty. And then from there, department chair, assistant dean, there's a hierarchy in these monastic institutions that we inhabit. And sometimes to get from one level to the next is unclear, and sometimes it's luck, sometimes it's parlaying certain things. And so it's something that I was full-time faculty, I think a year or two before I started the Opal Fellowship, going through the TSP program, and then maybe 2 or 3 years when I started to facilitate. And something I noticed was that when I came on as a facilitator, I was picking up those leadership skills that were helping me bridge, learn things that I would not get just as full-time faculty, but that I would need for the next stage if I wanted to take on a more leadership role, right? So I interviewed for a job, now I'm department chair of engineering studies, interviewed for a job a year and a half ago, and one of the earliest questions they ask is hey, can you have you supervised anyone, right? And if you've been full-time and your main job is to manage a classroom in addition to other projects, that can be a difficult question to respond to. But I found that doing work with Rebus, it's like this beautiful kind of in-between space where you have a structured environment, you have mentors, so Apurva and others kind of became my mentor, and hey, you are responsible for these projects, you need to see them succeed, you need to hold these teams accountable, and so you do that, and as a quasi supervisor, but you have support. I would struggle through a certain session and be like, Apurva, I think I failed that. That was a terrible, terrible job. I'm failing my team. What do I do? And I have a team around me to help me kind of move from this stage of my career to the next stage.
Thank you, Joel. Sorry, Liza, I tasked you with something, but I'm gonna bring you back into the room. Don't worry about it. We're talking about transferable skill sets. What do you think has transferred when you're thinking back to your facilitation methods and to your leadership skills? Where's the crossover?
I feel like this might be an unconventional answer, but what surprised me is that what I learned through the TSP program really translated into better classroom facilitation. So I do teach a 5-5, most of my sections are in person, and having the chance to work with these various teams from really different backgrounds, as well as having the support that Rebus provided, and also just the development opportunities, the opportunities to work with colleagues, really helped to shape how I interacted with my students as emerging professionals in the classroom. So that was unexpected for me. I didn't expect to find that particular benefit, but it was definitely something I noticed.
Bryan, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I would just say that I've taken a lot away from working with TSP to be able to sort of apply to the OER programs that we have at my institution. So when we first participated in TSP at my institution, although part of the intent was to support a faculty member through the creation of their OER, really what we were trying to do was to do some kind of reconnaissance and understand how is TSP structuring this to support all of these OER authoring projects, because we want to apply that to our context. And so that's something that I've really been able to take away, is how to kind of manage OER programs at my institution, and both the project management aspect of it, but also the sort of interpersonal kind of management aspect of it, which I think we'll talk about a little bit later.
Stacy, Bryan kind of teed up my next question, so I might ask it and then turn it over to you. He was talking about takeaways, and I was curious to learn more about what your professional development goals were when you came into this pathway.
So, I mean, first of all, so people understand, when you start, there's this survey that you get that's what do you want to get out of this? And I was like, what do you mean? I thought it was a trick question. I'm gonna provide a service. You're paying me to facilitate this. I've learned how to do this. What do you mean? What are my goals? And And there was like a whole list of them. I really was almost like taken aback to think about like, what do I want to get out of this? Like, I thought I was just doing this as a way of like helping people make OER and it looks good on my CV. And then it's like, oh, I could learn and get feedback from people, from my peers, from Apurva, from others of like what I'm actually doing and what I could do better. So I put on there about like facilitating groups because I tend to work more one-on-one. So there were different pieces I was able to put in, but just even the fact like the care, like I really want to underscore this about like that Apurva and Rebus put in, but really like I'm gonna say Apurva because she's the human who's doing it. Is just incredible of like feeling like, oh, I'm actually a person who matters and I can have goals as a part of this was just made me, even just asking the question made me feel cared for.
That makes my heart pound here. Liza, what did you come in?
It was interesting that while Stacy was talking, I felt the same way about you, Apurva. Like you always check in with us to make sure that we are okay. That's a question that Apurva's asking. And I remember even after COVID, it was just so great to have our cohort. But another thing that really struck me and has helped me with the program is that it's very rare we have an opportunity to get feedback that's going to help us to learn and grow in a way that like doesn't necessarily impact our main jobs, right? So if my department chair wants to give me feedback, I might get a little nervous about that. But I feel like Apurva's been really great about providing gentle but also corrective feedback that's helped me to grow as a person. So that's one thing that's really benefited me from the program.
You're all segueing very nicely into questions that I have prepared for you, because I'm curious to learn more about how this particular facilitator pathway has empowered you all to integrate your own experiences into pedagogy, or how has this program really allowed you to establish meaningful connections with students? How has it let you maybe even improve outcomes? Bryan, Joel, am I happy to hear your voices now?
Does Joel want to take that, or I can?
You know, it's interesting. I feel like we've had a few major disruptions, and our students have as well. So like my first experience with the TSD was during COVID, like 2020. As Liza mentioned, this was like the most consistent routine we had in first semester, like waking up at 8 a.m. Mountain Time or 7:30 a.m. and like logging on and talking OER. But it was kind of beautiful after a while, and so we were kind of digesting the impact of with the lockdowns with due to higher education and all this stuff, and thinking through like, oh hey, what we started to work on now is becoming increasingly important to the future of education. And then when I was facilitating the 2022 cohort, Lewis cohort, AI was becoming like this kind of ballooning, and I remember like Ethan Mullen would publish articles on like, oh hey, this is how you can leverage prompt engineering to personalize instruction or personalize learning. And so we would we go through the program, and I remember working in one-on-ones with certain groups and be like, hey, you know what, let's look at these recent publications from Moloch and think through like if you're trying to personalize your OER to your local, to your students, can we leverage some of these emerging technologies to think through what that looks like? But it also, it got me to think critically about what I'm doing for my own students, but also like what these groups are trying to work on and how AI might play a role in that. But then at the same time, we're having these discussions like, oh, hey, what are the ethics of this? And how, like, am I generating text and then just dumping it into the textbook? Or am I thinking through, like, it's creating analogies for me that I can better connect with my students with? And so all of these things that we have a lot of discussions around now happen very fast as this technology is coming rolling out.
So I guess one thing I would say sort of about my experience with it is that so a lot of the cohorts that we work with in TSP are there as a part of like a consortium or system like Lewis, for instance, or most. I work with like a sort of system or consortia that we have in Pennsylvania, and you know, worked with other open education organizations, and I feel like those experiences, things that I've taken away from those, I've been able to kind of apply to my experience with the cohorts that I'm working with in the TSP, but also to be able to kind of learn from what those systems are doing and applying that sort of in the reverse direction. It's really helped me with kind of thinking about these sorts of initiatives at like a system-wide kind of scale. And like I said, either being able to apply that to my experience as an instructor with Rebus, but also being able to take away from that experience and apply it to my work outside of Rebus.
It sounds like you've been able to, one, get exposure to systems outside of, you know, your institution or even state. And you're able to bring back that knowledge into your own practice. We've talked a lot about the systems of it all, and I want to bring it back to the humans in the room. You were all encouraged as facilitators to meet monthly in a community of practice, and we asked you to share your reflections, we asked you to share your challenges, we checked in on, you know, your personal lives as well. Can you describe what this experience was like, and how did something like this support your leadership journey?
If I can start on this one. Okay. I jumped right in when we were talking about things that have really been meaningful to us. So we hear that term learning community thrown out there a lot, right? And it's almost become like a buzzword, I think. But for me, those facilitator monthly check-ins were the first time I really experienced the power of a true learning community. It's like, oh, this is why people think this is so great. I mean, it was just very raw and real. I remember, I'm thinking back to Jonathan Port's Apurva. I shouldn't tell on him, but like, he had some real challenges, right? And we would all just troubleshoot those together. He's one of the most brilliant people I've ever met, to be clear. But yeah, sometimes it can be difficult when you're working with these cohorts. People are working on very different projects. They have different team dynamics. I think Jonathan's was a team dynamic. But the opportunity for us all to listen and share, commiserate, but also be very positive and solutions oriented. It really taught me the power of that particular model. And I love the opportunity. I actually really look forward to those monthly meetings. So thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else has reflections on this? Okay. Well, maybe a unique question then. What was something that you were able to focus and grow on through this pathway and program that you wouldn't have the opportunity to access maybe via your institutional role? And Joel, you talked about this at the start, but I'm curious to hear more. And thank you, Mark. Bryan, would you like to jump in, kick us off?
Yeah, sure. So I think that and I don't intend to like speak for everybody, but that there are a lot of like practical things that we can take away that we might not be getting elsewhere. And you know, so for instance, like I would think that when Joel originally went through this, that he was taking away things that he could apply like in his classroom kind of context. Whereas with me, you know, I'm generally not working with a specific class of students over and over and over again throughout the course of a semester or what have you. You know, I'm working with faculty, you know, maybe doing a lot of like kind of one-off sort of workshops or doing kind of an extended OER creation program or something like that. So that was something that I was able to apply to my specific context, was how do I, which I, you know, already kind of alluded to, but how do we kind of manage these sorts of programs? And you know, as I said, I generally don't get that experience of working with a extended kind of cohort situation with students or anything like that. So having that opportunity to keep coming back week after week, month after month with the students in the TSP program was a really great experience for me.
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that, you know, as someone who works with faculty on OER regularly, I don't often though work on a whole creation process. You know, starting from the beginning of why you want to do this and really having a structured way to move them through creation of an entire OER. So that was something new that I was able to say, like, at my institution, like, this is now a thing I know how to do, was really helpful for me of just not, it's not just adoption or adaptation, I actually also now can help faculty in order to create something and have these, you know, guiding questions and have a real structure and philosophy behind it that I have, you know, integrated into my practice.
I just wanted to briefly say, I alluded to this before, but like when I first started facilitating, I think it was after my second session, my first one went fine, the second one, I was like, the vibe was off, it's not what I wanted. I need help around this. And so Apurva said like, hey, why don't you log in and see how Bryan's going? Because Bryan does this quite a bit. Like it was an excellent fit given his professional background. And so I was able to jump into, you know, his cohort and just look at his facilitation style. He was, you know, uniquely, I guess, prepared for this kind of a situation in ways that I was not. Because I'm primarily like used to the classroom experience and he's used to a very different role than I am. And I think part of it, so I'm like building skills that I would not otherwise have access to, that I would rarely encounter in this kind of a situation. So I don't know if like Apurva is strategically saying like, hey, I'm gonna pick, you know, someone from this background and this background, and this background to facilitate, but you start to see kind of a flourishing in these learning communities when you put them together and say, hey, why don't you learn some things from this person, right?
The answer is no, Joel. We pick people who are excited by this and want to do this, and we go from there. Mark said in the chat, this is making him believe that OER is real again, and that I would just say this is maybe a leadership development effort disguised as a facilitator pathway. We have 1 minute left, so I'm going to combine our last two questions, and anyone can jump in. What makes this Rebus approach then so different compared to other ones? And what surprised you? You can talk about the good and the bad and the in-between.
Apurva, I have to jump in with one thing, back to the professional development. I didn't talk about this, but the way the curriculum is so thoughtful about integrating different voices and especially Indigenous ways of knowing has actually shaped my whole practice. And I do think that's actually something that's special about the Rebus experience, that opportunity to be introduced to other ways of thinking and learning about things.
Thank you, and shout out to Yorgos Weiland for bringing that really key revision into the curriculum.
Yeah, I talked about it before, but like the ethics of care that's really brought into it, to me, like we were always people first. Whether we were participants in the program or as facilitators, like it was about your well-being and you could grapple with things and talk about things and feel safe and cared for, and that was something that was intentionally fostered.
Thank you. We are at our time, so Bryan, Joel, Liza, if you have like a 2-second like rapid fire response, we can entertain that maybe.
I think it's the budgets.
Okay.
Let me just quickly add, you like I have a fascinating perspective on how institutions work across the United States because of this program. Like Apurva's perception of higher ed in the United States is so fascinating because of those kinds of events. So that was kind of just a wonderful gift.
Bryan, you can give us the final word.
Well, I guess one thing I do want to make sure to mention was just that Joel was being very sort of self-deprecating throughout, and I just want to say I learned a lot from him too. So credit to him as well. But yeah, I feel like Rebus has been a really good opportunity to kind of like try things out and feel like you have a bit of a safety net to be able to grow and try things out that you might not have tried out otherwise.
Thank you all. I'm sorry to cut you off, but we are at our time. Thank you, everybody, for the chat. Thank you. Sorry, is there a break now?
I don't know, I feel a bit sketch. We usually have like down.
Why do they start?
Thank you all, and sorry, I have more to say at the end, but. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Your phone.
Bryan, stay on the screen for a photograph, please.
Yeah.
Okay.
Cheers, fine. Where should we stand? Thanks, Shannon.
I'll get Bryan also.
Hi, Bryan.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Apurva. And we're.
You got it, thank you, Bryan.
Thank you.
Our train is so soon.
Oh,
my favorite, I thought it's like, oh, but then I can get it on, so like, there's no way to. Wait. I'm gonna read you all that next.